Hi, I'm Angela Pearce, and this is Building SEND Futures, a podcast series exploring how we can deliver better SEND outcomes through collaboration across education and the built environment. In this episode, Bridging the Gap from Bids to Bricks, we'll be exploring how those early stage proposals translate to better outcomes on site. I'm joined today by my colleagues from Hampshire County Council and Southern Construction Framework, and together we're bringing perspectives across client delivery, procurement, and construction. I'll hand over to them to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm James Wright, Head of the Southern Construction Framework across London and the South East.
Hi, I'm Dimitri Lefteroux. I head up the cost management and category management teams within property services at Hampshire County Council.
Thanks. It makes sense to start at the beginning, I guess, of the journey of getting a project from paper and onto site. How do projects typically take shape prior to bid stage? So before we as contractors even see them.
More recently, a lot of the new build facilities that we've been building in the schools have been as a direct result of developers' contributions and the expansion of house builders and developments that come out and arise from that. So for us, it will be hitting those triggers, whether it be the completion percentage or a number of occupations, and then that will just kickstart our involvement in the project and the project starting to pick up for a delivery date in either 29 or 30 or wherever it may be.
And that brief, obviously there's the process around identifying the site, and we know sites are always hard to come by. How do you go about that briefing bit? How is that sort of done in your department, or is it a wider consultation piece with all the stakeholders that will eventually be involved in that delivering or operating that school?
So predominantly our colleagues in children's services, and there's an SEND team specifically, so they'll highlight a need for a number of places in an area, and that will be sort of the starting point for us all. We will then come through to property and our estates team. We'll see what sites we have, if the size of the site fits the size that we need for the number of pupils that are needed, and if it's in the location that is needed. That is all done sort of hand in hand, really. So the need is identified just directly from children's services, and then property will start to get involved and help to identify sites, and then start testing those sites in terms of the suitability of them, and then we'll try and narrow it down to a select few so that we can carry out a proper feasibility study on that site.
And when you're sort of assessing those sites, at that stage, have you already got a school area in mind, as in the area of the building? Has that schedule of accommodation already been developed, or is it literally, we know we need to get a school on this site, we'll make it work if we have to?
No, so we'll just use the it's a PB 103 that's got the area schedules, and we'll know that a 2FE needs to be X amount, or a 120 place SEN school needs to be X amount of square meters. Typically, because we do quite a lot of work and quite a lot of projects, we'll have a footprint of a building, and then our teams in our estates team and our architectural team will start mapping out how that fits on the site. Does it work? The orientations. And then we've got a landscape team as well, so they'll start getting involved in terms of area for external play, for car parking. Does the site suit it? Does it work? Is the site of the right shape? Because obviously you might have 2.1 hectares, which is what you need, but it might be a triangle, in which case 2/3 of it aren't really usable. So it's a bit of a joint effort, really, and we're fortunate because we've got quite a large property team, and we've got the expertise in terms of people in estates. We've got landscape architects, engineers, architects, interior designers, and then obviously at the tail end, quantity surveying team will come in, and then we'll start mapping out feasibility studies to then select that site to progress through the RIBA stages.
One of the things that we've learned from a number of the SEN schools that we've done recently is the, depending on the size of the school, so BB 103 and BB 104 don't work very well when you start getting into the realms of 150 plus SEN students. it just doesn't translate as it would for a much smaller school. What about the briefs from your perspective, James, and what you're seeing coming through from other clients and other projects?
Well, it's interesting because Hampshire are different to a lot of clients, have a big property team, have, internal consultant teams that can do all that feasibility up front. So for a lot of our clients, they're employing consultants to do that work and maybe don't have as good a knowledge of the local area, the local population, the need and the reasons why they're doing those developments. So that, I think, is an interesting difference in public sector delivery between those authorities that have the internal teams and those that don't and rely on the external consultants, and putting a lot of trust in those consultants to get things right at those really early stages, because we talk a lot at SCF about early engagement of the contractors, but it's also true of the consultant team. And one thing we don't necessarily know is how early those consultant teams are involved in those types of decisions and those types of processes on projects. And maybe in some of those projects that we see come through, you might be able to pick out the ones that have had that really early engagement, that feasibility over 10 sites or however many we're talking about, versus those that have gone, we've only got this site and we need to figure it out for this site and see how it works. I think we've seen a lot of challenges with site conditions and things on projects we've procured. And so, I think it's an interesting differentiation between different public sector clients and how they approach that really early stage. And I think Hampshire are fortunate, and there are others out there that have those internal teams that can really get in amongst those projects at the very, very early stages, probably earlier than most consultants do. And I think that can have an impact on that brief and that proposals late down the line.
And are you able to tell when you see tenders coming through for procurement, when there is, whether or not that project is going to sail through or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we get a feeling, and we do a lot of, as you know, a lot of early market engagement. One of the kind of benefits of coming to a framework like SCF is you can engage with the contractors much earlier in the process. You can get their view on site conditions, on logistics, on anything that's challenging the project. And quite often in that feedback, it becomes clear that there's specific issues with the site and or the project itself in terms of the value, the design and those types of things. And you can pretty early see the ones that are going to be more difficult than the others. And then that's our role to support those clients and try and give as much of that early engagement as we can, because ultimately that's going to benefit the project at tender stage, but then also through pre-construction and into construction. But yeah, you can definitely see the projects that may struggle.
The building itself is obviously very important, but there's also the social value angle to it, particularly because SEN schools are struggling to bridge that gap between education and employment. And sometimes the construction process can help facilitate that, as long as that intent is set out quite early on. What have you seen sort of best practice at that bid stage in, I don't know, whether you're asking for a social value proposal or you're suggesting contractors do the same? Have you got any examples of where that's really delivered the right outcomes for that school and for that local community, and not just sort of ticking boxes as we sometimes need to do?
One thing we've been talking about a lot at SCF recently is this kind of understanding of cost versus value. And I think the public sector isn't great at differentiating cost and value. It becomes very much about, can we deliver it for this budget, which of course we're public sector spending public money, we have to be. But we almost forget what we're trying to achieve sometimes, some of these projects. We've got some great projects where it's for older children with SEND. It's about how we translate them into work and life after school. And they're great projects and with great outcomes. But it becomes about, can we deliver it for that cost? And sometimes you forget about what you're trying to achieve. And it's a difficult conversation with the cost manager stood next to me, about at what point does that crossover happen? And social value is that key bit around. Lots of clients think and consultants, it's the contractor's duty to go and tell me what you can do. And not enough clients have a really good handle on what they want to achieve in the detail. They know what they want to achieve in the round, but how does that get achieved? I think it's quite often left to a contractor to decide that. And you've probably seen that in your experience, where you're driving the outcomes. So it's a mixed bag. Some clients really, really well set up, know exactly what they want to achieve, and put a lot of pressure on contractors to do it. And then there are others that are happy for a contractor to lead that process. So it's a bit of a mix.
We have one of our projects. It was quite interesting. So we all know what the Procurement Act says around social value being a certain percentage of a bid, and they didn't do one. It was so strange to do a bid without a social value proposal to accompany it. But their view was, actually, we'd like to sit down at the very start of the pre-construction process and map out a social value action plan that will truly deliver benefits to both the school and the community. So it's very much been fashioned during the pre-construction stage around this project, and it's not about CITB targets and the rest. It is.
That's it. It can become a tick box exercise in bid processes. Promise the world, might not be able to deliver everything, but we'll do our best. But actually, that approach, whilst maybe not testing it at procurement, at least you're going to get outcomes that are we talk about legacy and lasting outcomes.
It's interesting because how do you ensure that you've got the right person to help you do that? If you don't ask anything at all, I can understand we don't want to say anything because we want to actually spend some time and deliver it and do it properly. But how do you know that you're working with the best person to do that without asking anything?
I mean, they had, as part of the sort of down selection process in the MC1, they were, obviously we included social value in that, so there was a slight aspect, but for them it was more about the getting the scheme through design and planning, because it was a constrained site. Planning was going to be difficult, and also they that they had no ambition to keep to their control option, if you want to call it that. It needed to be something different, so a big part of the submission was also around design proposals. So that was, for them, that was the priority. But yeah, it was very strange.
Construction is a balance at all times of cost, quality, time, and you can throw social value into it, make it a square, modern square, rather than the old-fashioned triangle approach. It is always trying to find the right balance between those things, and it's an interesting approach. It's good to see the contractor and the client side of that. Actually, it was quite interesting for us because we'd not seen that before, and it gave us a chance to target actual outcomes that are valuable to everyone. But from a client perspective, well, how do you know you've got the best partner to do that? One thing I would say from our experience as SCF, working with what we've got now, 8, 9, 10 contractors across all the lots, everyone's committed. All those contractors are committed to delivering social value.
Social value targets are set in isolation from school operators or children's services, as an example. Are we actually delivering the right social value, or are you giving us the right brief, I suppose, is the question. How do your bids get pulled together? Is that with the property team? Is it with your procurement team?
So largely it will be pulled together by the property team. Our procurement team will have a look through it, but obviously they leave the technical bit of asking the questions and stuff firmly with us. And in terms of social value, we have got teams within children's services that look at sort of trying to place SEND or ex-pupils, or pupils that are older, and it's something that we're trying to work through. And although James's role is largely around SCF, we do have some other team members, and we have taken on an apprentice for a period of time. They sat within the team and that look after our soft FM stuff. And through that, we've been able to then try and place some people with contractors as well. So that's been working it's been working quite well, and it might be something that we look to expand on. But it's quite hard to have someone that you want to place somewhere and then try and make sure that all the stars align and it can happen. And
Well, yeah, and you think local authorities are big places. There's lots of employees in any local authority, and there will be teams within each of them. I imagine there certainly are at Hampshire that are their role is about employment and skills and life after school for SEND pupils, things like that. So, and I imagine that's not unique to Hampshire. I can't imagine it is. But are those people involved in those decisions around setting social value plans and policies?
At bid stage.
Probably not. Probably not for the most part. You'll have corporate policies. Lots of authorities will have those. But will the individual teams be involved? Potentially not. And we've seen a lot of value in engaging with that team at Hampshire, and that was came about quite randomly, actually. Good outcomes for local people, and it's a good story. But maybe had that initial interaction not happened, we might have missed that opportunity. And you wonder how often that happens.
As projects move into delivery, have you are there any typical areas where that original vision that you sort of set out at bid stage starts to evolve or change?
A lot of it is around design and design fit in budget. That is a constant thorn in project side. Has that design, crept away from the allocated budget? And I think we quite often get in scenarios where contractors are appointed, they do their real deep dive into the design, and there's gaps from earlier stages that maybe need filling out and completing, and there's areas where it's crept and it's now maybe not aligned with the cost plan and stuff like that. And then you have to start thinking about, what do we need to do with this design? Do we need to scale something back? And that's when those principles start becoming at risk. And we see that on lots and lots of projects. And I think we've had it on Hampshire projects as well.
yeah, I mean, we're not immune to it. And it is difficult. You want to share what the information you have at minicomp stage, and it might not be a lot, because we might not even be at planning. So it's difficult for us on our side, and no doubt for contractors as well, to try and get that right. So it does become a challenge. There are times, I think, where maybe some people don't want to give bad news. So I do think some of it is linked to somebody not wanting to start off on a bad foot and telling someone that they can't afford something, or that it's just absolutely not. I think that they might be good in saying this is an absolute no-goer, but actually, if it's just a tiny bit, they'll maybe not want to break that bad news, not want to feel that they're sort of affecting their opportunities and chances of getting that project. So I do think sometimes people just don't want to give bad news sometimes, and then you just sleepwalk into a problem later on.
And how does, because obviously you're a go-between, aren't you? You're the in between the contractor who's going to build it and the team that's going to own that school and operate it. How it must be quite I say distressing, but disappointing, perhaps frustrating, when those conversations happen with the contractor, and then do you find you go back to children's services to say, this idea that you have X, Y, and Z in your school, we're going to have to look at things a bit different or do something different?
Yeah, we would do, definitely. I mean, if it will result in a change to either the brief or what was the initial scope, yeah, we can't just unilaterally run around and make those kinds of decisions. But I don't think we've ever got to a point where the changes that we've had to do are of such a volume that actually we're steering away from what everyone first wanted. So we've been quite fortunate in that sense. If you have confidence in yourself and what you're delivering, and our team sort of broadly know what is needed to make a school operational, then we're talking probably on the margins of a few little tweaks as opposed to wholesale changes.
Across all of the projects that you're seeing on the framework, are there any common points where alignment could be better?
cost is always a big issue. It's public sector. There's only so much money available. Going back to ask for more money is awful.
But no one wants to do it.
No one wants to do it.
Regardless of whether you're a public authority or not.
And no one wants to do it. So that transparency and openness at tender stage, it's like that's the SCF ethos. I don't care if the project's over budget. I do. But in principle, what I care about is how early have you told that client that there's a problem with cost? And I think there's quite often contractors fall into this trap of, I'm going to try and solve that problem before I tell you about it because I don't want to give you that bad news. But actually, every single client you speak to, I would rather know much earlier because I can start managing my stakeholders. I can input ideas. I can work through value engineering options that if you just throw them at a client, they're going to say no to. But actually, if I can warm them up to that might help the situation. So that's one area where I think better alignment, more honesty. Not honesty is the wrong word. It's just being upfront with the honesty, if that makes sense. And just trusting that a client's not going to throw you under the bus because they want to know if there's a problem. And the earlier they know, the better prepared they can be to manage that. You do it for the right reasons. I'm going to try and solve that for you. But invariably, it's not always solvable. And the earlier that issue is on the table, the better. As a client, you must think that. That must be
absolutely. I mean,
right.
there's nothing quite like going through some sort of V exercise and someone saying we should change brick to render. And you're like, I've already got planning. Like, we can't really consider it now because we're committed now. We're way down the line. But if we'd had that discussion much earlier, it could have been a viable option without having to start a process again, whether that is planning or revisiting design stages because you're undoing so much. You don't want to get to stage 4 and then suddenly go, I want to change, I don't know, X, and then you have to go all the way back and update everything and essentially start from scratch because then it's just time and time
and
variably is
all
money.
we're doing is delaying access to education, aren't we?
Yeah.
This leads us quite nicely on to kind of the next discussion area, which is around funding and benchmarking. In our experience, SEN schools come at a premium to build. On a cost per square meter basis, they are higher than your mainstream primary school. How do you deduce that budget?
Benchmarking for us is quite a strong suit. We work with both EBDOG and the DFE and produce a national benchmarking study, which collects information from anyone that's willing to give it to us essentially, but it's national. And I think we're ticking over 1,300 projects in total that we've got data and information for, and SEND has historically been a part of the report or part of the study where we've not really had much information.
Okay.
But whereas everyone is now sort of got that need, it's an area that's picking up. So we're able to sort of lean in on our work on that. We deliver our own SEND schools as well, so we can always go back and benchmark that. And then, thirdly, we do have access to contractors on the framework. So if we do need to do some early engagement, or if as a part of the mini competition, we want to ask about benchmarking and what have you delivered and how much does that cost per square meter or per pupil, whichever your metric is, we can do that, and we do that. Generally, we won't put a number in, say, our capital program unless we've done a little bit of work on it and we're fairly confident that something is achievable. We might not know exactly what it is, but we know we can do something because we've got all this evidence that something can be delivered for that.
I think that's the important thing, isn't it? Because sometimes it feels like clients are, or sort of the property teams are given a pot of X amount and basically
Make it work.
Go away, and then that really starts to affect the decisions made, and particularly when we're talking SEN, you're now starting to potentially compromise that learning environment in order to get a facility in for that money.
Yeah. And that issue around here's a pot of money, make something work, that is a red flag from a framework perspective, because we look at those projects and you can tell the ones that have that issue. And that, I go back to that transparency and honesty part, it's not just contractors, there's consultants that will be bidding for those projects. Can you deliver for my budget? Yes or no? essentially. And invariably they're going to say yes, even if they think, some might say no, it doesn't work, doesn't stack up. Some will say it's close enough for me to go at it. Same way contractors will do when they bid projects down the line. And you're almost reinforcing this position at consultant tender stage, at contractor tender stage, that this is achievable, when actually it may not have been from the outset. And everyone's trying to help and say, yeah, we'll pick it up, we think we can deliver it for that. And they'll work through it and try and support it. But then how does that affect those outputs, those deliverables? Because you're going to have to, at some point, take some bits out.
Do you ask the question the right way? I've only got a pot of X, so what can we do? As opposed to, I've got a pot of X and I need you to do this. As long as we can have those conversations before we get to, out to Minicom, we've sat down, we said, right, because sometimes things just might not be feasible. You especially in the S&D world, where you're seeing maybe some sort of resource provisions in sort of more mainstream schools and stuff. You might just go, well, it gets to a point where it just doesn't stack up. It's just not worth it. It's not worth it. It's always worth it. It's just financially and on that side, it doesn't work.
I mean, that kind of in the realms of that trust and expectation now, isn't it? And all about managing those expectations. In that situation, how do you manage a children's services team or an operator who's got one set of expectations versus reality?
Generally, there's conversations, especially with us, where we're all sort of internal, we're all working with each other on more than one project, and we will be working together for the foreseeable. There's sort of conversations of, don't get me wrong, they're difficult and they're awkward, but they're with people that you've either worked with for a period of time, or you're going to continue. You've got that relationship, so you just have those difficult conversations and just trust that actually, you've got to hold steady on your judgment, because an architect is a professional, aren't they? If they say this site just doesn't work in, then we just need to trust that and move on.
Construction is a people-based industry, isn't it? A project's success can revolve around the characters and do they work well together. And one of the founding principles of frameworks is about creating longer lasting relationships, less transactional, more opportunity for clients to work more closely with a select group of contractors, so they can build those relationships to prevent difficult conversations being difficult. Because all people, aren't they? Everyone wants to go home at the end of the day and go, I've had a good day. No one wants to go, get home and it was stressful because I had this issue that we couldn't resolve and we argued about it for 3 hours. No one actually wants to do that. And I think we sometimes forget that we are all just people. In what I've seen in the industry, people want to do the right thing and get projects delivered well.
Going back to your point about people and that we're all here to do the best that we can at the work that we do. I found on the projects where we've had a lot of success, particularly in pre-construction, and getting it through difficult financial conversations and difficult planning processes, etc., is when the entire team has this belief or this shared objective about a scheme. So, for example, one of the SEN schools we're delivering, we're just about to get to site actually. The operator was on board from the very start. And what our team did was, straight after the bid had gone in and we were appointed, is we went and visited that trust's other school sites. And what that meant was that throughout the pre-construction process, where those what we would deem to be easy value engineering decisions suddenly no longer became easy, because we understood the challenges of the children, the challenges the children face, as well as the staff. We had to think about the welfare of both the pupils and those that look after them and educate them. And actually it made it harder. So actually we got into the realms of scope reduction, and now obviously scope reduction is we're taking space away or we're making things smaller. And it was quite interesting. We went through a really much longer process, a much more collaborative process around VE, to try and find ways of doing things slightly different with the operator on board, to make sure that we didn't affect those outcomes. For me, that just sings best practice, and something we should be doing on all projects. But have you had any experience with where value engineering has just gone beyond just those spec changes and you've had to bring people around the table to try and find solutions?
I definitely can't recall being quite in that space, but actually that whole here's what we've done before is really good and helps with benchmarking. So it just makes all those conversations easier. So when you do have to then go, well, actually we're a bit over budget, but it is because X, Y, and Z, and everyone can stand around and go, oh, well, yeah, actually no, it's that the one that you showed me round only had 10 parking spaces, and I've insisted on 15. So of course it's a little bit more expensive.
Goes back to that point, that value versus cost. Actually, we need 15 spaces in this example because of these children need additional support or whatever it might be. And you go, well, actually, there's a good value case for having that, and it might cost a little bit more, but that's what we need in this to support those children. I don't think contractors are proactive enough, early enough in processes. I don't think, I might be totally wrong, that contractors are proactive enough to say, what about option A, B, and C at an earlier stage? I think we're quite happy to progress something to a degree. We get to a point and then we say, okay, it's over budget and now we need to look at value engineering. And then value engineering is always late. It's always rushed. Clients are often having to make decisions that maybe they don't want to make. Could we as an industry be more open to thinking about alternatives at an earlier stage and, okay, well, if that doesn't work, what can we do this? And does that fit with the design? How easy will that be to incorporate or take away or whatever? I'm not sure if that happens early enough or not, because we're in a difficult market.
I guess it's a bit around managing expectation. We can only cost what we can see. We can make assumptions until that design is fully designed and all those bits come together. It's sometimes hard to be so finite in our numbers. I mean, we have estimators and cost planners, or it's not scientific. And a bit like you, we rely on data and benchmarking. It's just making sure that if we do have to go down that route, everyone understands that hierarchy. What are the most valuable items to everyone on that project team, not just silos, it's what, and then what isn't, and then everyone focuses on the what isn't as important part, so that particularly when we're talking around SEN schools, because the decisions have so much more impact than perhaps in a mainstream setting.
It comes back to that construction buzzword collaboration, doesn't it? We all talk about it. Everyone talks about collaboration, but it does come down to that. It's how willing is everyone to actually work together and go home at the end of the day and say, "We've got a decent outcome there."
I think we've talked a lot around the bid stage, the setting the expectations, pre-construction, and some of those challenges we face. If we go into delivery now, do you tend to find, for the most part, that the schemes don't change once you've got into contract, other than some small bits? For the most part, the project is as designed.
Yeah, I mean, it's just change is very subjective, isn't it? We will have a client contingency as part of the contract sum. Inevitably, we spend, 70% of it at least. So there is obviously some change and some stuff does happen on site. But we wouldn't say, build a 120 place SEN school and then on site go, I'll change it to 150, or can we now knock it down to 70? It would never be anything massive like that. And if anything like that did happen, there would be a real reason behind it. It would have something would have come out from left field that we weren't aware of, or we're trying to soften a pain later on down the line.
Looking ahead and what needs to change, and we know 2-stage tends to be better, having all those parties round the table at the right time to develop a scheme together often delivers much better outcomes. What else could we do to better align that bid stage ambition with reality?
Have those bids earlier. That's SCF's ethos, isn't it? Engage earlier. Use the knowledge and the experience of the contractors. For a lot of authorities that, we do a handful of these projects for the contractors. I mean, how many have Galliford Try done in the last year? Across the contractor portfolio, there's hundreds of examples of lessons learned and good experience on projects locally. So I think we'd always say, even if you're not procuring at that early stage, come to the framework, let us help you engage with the contractors and get some of that free advice, some of that feedback. You don't have to procure at stage one, but there's always added value you can get, and we can help with that. So that would be, for some reason, clients are nervous about coming and speaking to people that early, but through a framework, you do it in a structured way, it's fair, it's consistent, and it can add value and make your whole procurement process, pre-construction, construction, a smoother journey for everyone, I think.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because you don't want to send out a mini competition at a time where everything's vague, because then that doesn't help the contractors respond in the way that you might want them to or expect to. But at the same time, you don't want to leave it way too late, and there's that fine balance. Have you internally bottomed out enough of your problems to make it worthwhile bringing someone in which case get them in as quick as possible?
So it has its pluses and the positives and the negatives. That's been a really insightful discussion. Thank you both for sharing your perspectives so openly. I think it's, from what we talked about today, bridging the gap between those early stage proposals and delivery isn't going to be straightforward. It's always going to have its challenges, but those conversations really highlighted how early alignment, collaboration, good engagement can really ensure that when procuring an SEN scheme, if we do all of those things, we'll deliver schools that deliver the right outcomes for the children that are going to be using them. So great conversation. Really appreciate your time. If this conversation has resonated with you, please like, follow, share, because we'd really like to keep the conversation going. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.